Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another quick little video. As you can tell from the title up there, it's going to be a retro video this time. This is going to be a video I recorded a couple years ago, but for whatever reason, I never got around to uploading it. I do not know why, I don't remember. I don't know if I just put it on my hard drive and then I forgot about it until I rediscovered it, or I just said, yeah, it's not worth the trouble. As you can tell from up there, it is related to Iron Man 3. Now, I know there was a lot of controversy when it came out because of the one twist involving the Mandarin, which this has been a couple years. I think everyone knows what the twist is, so I don't have to state it. And I know a lot of people weren't a big fan of it, but I'll say I'm one of the people that actually enjoyed Iron Man 3. I definitely think it's one of the better sequels. I don't think it's the best sequel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To me, that's still Winter Soldier. It's one of the better ones, and I definitely think it's a step up from Iron Man 2. I mean, I still like that film to an extent, but that film, the Avengers build-up stuff does kind of drag it down a little bit, and a couple things could have probably been executed a little bit better, but I'll discuss that whenever I get around to re-reviewing that film. But let's just say was this video kind of sums up some of my thoughts now, but another video down the line I'll be able to re-articulate it. But I felt it'd be, just for at least I don't know how to say this. Like, I would say posterity, but I don't know if that's the word that entirely encapsulates what I'm trying to express here. Just maybe a little bit of historical perspective to show in the year that the film came out what my initial thoughts were on it, especially since I saw it twice that year. And then, of course, showing when I do the video for it again one day down the line, to show how my thoughts on it have grown a little bit. Perspective on certain things might shift and all that. And that's also why I'm putting this little thing at the beginning, so this is a hindsight. This is my opening for the video that's about to be shown. And remember that some of these thoughts are the same, some of them not so much, because I'm probably going to edit part of it just to speed up the pace a little bit. But for the most part, my thoughts in the following video are what they were the year the film came out, and some of them are still there, but it's not 100% the same.
Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another random video, one I've been meaning to do for a while. Before I really get into the main point of the video, sorry if you hear any music in the background. My brother's in the bathroom. As you can probably tell right now, he's listening to Disturbed. I think it's kind of ironic that's a song playing with this video. As you can tell from the title, this is a video where I am talking about why I do not hate Iron Man 3. Now, Iron Man, the series, it's been a series that most people seem to think. Okay, let me reword that. This is a series where the first entry everyone seems to love. Iron Man, it's a special DVD of it I have. The second one, people are mixed on. I can see why. Everyone seems to love the Avengers except for a few people, one of which I'm not going to get into it, but some of them nitpick on it, which I will probably try to address at least one of those in this video. And in the third one, first some people were against it, but now it seems more and more people are jumping on the, I wouldn't say a bandwagon, because a bandwagon I would describe as a film that basically is flawless. People start hating on it. Like, for example, John Carpenter's Halloween, but only a few people seem to do that. I wouldn't describe it as a bandwagon, you see more and more people are having problems with the movie. Not if that's their prerogative, but it's like, I'm one of those people who are like, really? Now, in this video, I plan on addressing some of these problems, why they don't bother me, and why I actually don't mind how they are in the film. Now, as this is a video I've actually been thinking on for a while, I managed to come up with at least 6 major problems. If they're minor ones and I don't address them in the video, feel free to bring them up in the comment section. Now, before I get to the meat of the video, of course, I'm going to talk about the other entries in the series, because I rewatched them before I did this video to see if my thoughts on Iron Man 3 were still the same. Now, the original Iron Man, I would consider probably one of the best comic book movies made in recent memory. And this, along with The Incredible Hulk from '08, is basically what started the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And also, this film, along with Tropic Thunder, is basically what brought new life to Robert Downey Jr.'s career. Then, of course, Iron Man 2 from 2010. While it's not as good as Iron Man, I would say it is one of those films that is a decent entry in the series. It's kind of like how when you compare TMNT 1990 to Secret of the Ooze. It's like that. And of course, you guys all know when I reviewed the film, I had a few problems with it. You know, Mickey Rourke's lack of screen time and his death, and then of course the whole Avengers push thing, which I will say after the Avengers has come out, I actually don't mind that part of the movie upon rewatching it anymore. But there is one thing about it that I will address later in it, which watching it I'm like, why didn't you just think of that solution first? But I will get to it in due time. But overall, I actually like the film still, and the major stuff that bothered me doesn't really bother me much anymore. Though I'll say I think the fight with Mickey Rourke could have been a little bit longer, and I think he should have had a little bit more screen time. But for what he has, he's good. And of course, don't forget he has probably one of the weird lines you could just say randomly and get people to go, "What the fuck? I want my bird. I want my bird. That is not my bird." And then, of course, drone better. And then, of course, Avengers, I rewatch it. Still a very fun comic book movie. Now, some people have complaints about it, and some of them I can see, some of them I can't. One that I did catch the explanation for this time was how the heck Thor got back into Earth from Asgard. Apparently, it's just mentioned in passing, and I actually had to rewind it and put the subtitles on to catch it. Apparently, Odin gathered something called dark matter, which I'm like, what? To Wikipedia! Apparently dark matter is a power energy substance in the Marvel Universe. I'm guessing it's used for a variety of different things. I guess in this instance they used it. They had the All-Father gather enough of it so that Thor could come to Earth to get Loki. Now that begs the question of how did they know that he was there? My guess is that the guy who was in charge of the whatever the transportation, the Bifrost or something. I think that's the name of it. The guy that was in charge of it. You guys don't know who I'm talking about. I forget the character's name, but you guys know who I'm talking about. He probably saw that Loki was there, or there had some other reasons to tell that Asgardian was on Earth, so they gathered it. They probably had been gathering it for a while, but they sped it up, and then they sent Thor. But because it was a runway thing, that's the reason Thor wanted to get the Tesseract back. Also, it would take Loki with him. That's just my guess on it. Anyway, still a very fun film. And of course, the ending of that film segues into the film, Iron Man 3. Which, before anyone asks, yes, I am wearing an Iron Man shirt. Now, Iron Man 3, a film I really do like. Now, of course, the trailer does kind of make it out to be kind of like Dark Knight Rises, which I will still say I still enjoy that film more than Dark Knight Rises. Now, people say this is just one. This is technically not part of the list, but I'm just going to bring it up. Some people have said that it rips off part of the storyline from Dark Knight Rises. No, it is not. It basically just uses the same hero falls from a villain and then rises again archetype. It's been used countless times. It just reuses it again. Now, here, this is basically just... I'll start off with the one that I forgot to put on the list, but I remembered as I was doing this video. Tony Stark removing... this is, I think, just a minor one, but Tony Stark removing the shrapnel from his chest at the end of Iron Man 3, at the end of the movie, and then throwing that new material he made at the end of the second movie into the ocean. Now, throwing it into the ocean, that part I understand. He could have just kept on his desk like he kept the original arc reactor he made in the first film. Now, him taking out the shrapnel of his chest, that I have no problem with, because rewatching the first and second film, I'm like, why didn't he do that to begin with? Maybe it's just me thinking this, but if I had the same amount of money that Tony Stark did, the first thing I would have done when I got back to civilization after the press conference is I would have gone into surgery and have that thing removed. Because remember, the main reason he even has the arc reactor in his chest to begin with is to keep that thing from reaching his heart. Now think about it. If you remove that shrapnel, you don't have to have the arc reactor in your chest. Meaning that by the events of the second film, you won't have the poisoning happen because it's in your body. And that's in the second film we're rewatching. I'm like, you could just remove the shrapnel here and that would have solved that problem. Granted, he could have still made the new element to help with energy, but he wouldn't have had to do it to save his own life. Maybe that would have killed the motivation of it, but could have saved his skin earlier and he wouldn't have had to go through all that. It's just one thing. That's probably the only thing about the second film that really bothers me now. Mostly because eventually he did remove the shrapnel, but it's just one thing of like, why didn't he do that earlier? Now, okay, then this is probably the first one that... now, the ones I actually wrote down, I don't know what order I'm doing this in, probably the order I numbered them, but this is the one that I hear a lot, and I'm like, I don't get this one. The lack of Iron Man in Iron Man 3. You can tell from the look on my face, I'm like, what? I don't get that. it's fine if that's a problem you have with the movie, but I just don't get it. Because for me, Tony and Iron Man, same person, doesn't matter. If he's in the suit, out of the suit, he's still Iron Man. And also, if I was counting right, he only had a little bit less screen time in this film inside the suit. Because in the first film, he's building the suit, so his time outside of the suit is kind of forgivable because he's trying to get it done. Second film, he's mostly in the suit, either in the end of the film when they're fighting, and that one scene where he's, excuse me, sir, I need you to exit the donut. The rest of the time, it's just brief scenes of him in the suit, other than, of course, his fight scene with Rourke. Most of the time, he's out of the suit. This film, he's out of the suit a lot of the time, too. It's a lot more, but it actually has a storyline reason. Like the other one, it has more of a storyline reason for it. Now, I will admit, this is probably connected to another one, I will admit, Tony did have time to go, at one point in the film, go back to his house and get one of the undamaged suits. But of course, for how the story's going, maybe he didn't have that on his mind, or maybe he thought going to fight the Mandarin was more pressing at that time. That's just me. But as for lack of Iron Man, I don't really get that argument. I guess it's kind of connected to the Dark Knight one, lack of Batman in it, but with me, I don't see it. Maybe the lack of him actually using the suit, or using it properly, that I could understand, but just saying a lack of Iron Man, for me, I just don't get it. Number 2, this is what I can't really defend, but I can talk about, and I'll bring up, it doesn't bother me. Tony not using the house party protocol earlier in the film. Now, of course, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, the house party protocol is the name of a function in the movie that we see, that thing that happens in the trailer where all the suits come up, which I will say, in retrospect, that probably would have been better if he saved that for later. If they had saved that, probably would have made a bigger impact in the end of the film if we saw those suits come up. It's just like Arnold's cameo in Expendables 1 would have been more powerful if we didn't know it was coming. Now, of course, people have made fun of this, even How It Should Have Been made fun of it. You want me to invoke the house party protocol now? Which would probably have been a good idea after challenging the Mandarin, which is another thing I'll bring up in a bit. He could have activated it, which I would have activated it how they did it in that one, but I only would have sent a few suits out just on patrol issues. Now, as for why he didn't activate it when he was actually attacked, he didn't really have enough time. He barely had enough time to get Pepper and the other girl out of there and then get in the suit himself to fight, even though it wasn't combat ready. As for not being combat ready, I can partially understand that, and I'm going to partially use the first 2 films to defend my reasoning for it. In the first film, he's had plenty of time to tinker with the first suit by the time he actually uses it in combat, so we don't know how, doesn't really give an exact time, it just like segues. I guess you could say it could be like a week or so before. In the second film, the new suit that he has, you can tell he probably built it a while ago, so obviously it is going to be combat ready, especially if you brought it with him just in case. And the other suit he has is basically a normal suit, so obviously it's combat ready. In Avengers, the new suit that he uses, obviously Jarvis had been building it for a while, so it was combat ready. It just had to have some minor tweaks to it before he could use it against Loki. As for the suit in this one, since he's still basically just finished it, I can imagine it not being fully combat ready, and then maybe that also affects why it runs out of power easily, which that brings up a thing of if he has an arc reactor in the suit, why does it run out of power like that when they're supposed to run power forever? I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not a genius on the arc reactor. Why does the arc reactor in the second one have to have cores replaced when you don't get a thing, when you don't have an inkling, when we don't even have an idea that has to happen in the first film? I don't know, maybe stuff taken from the comics, because remember, I didn't really read the comics that much, so maybe it's something like that. Now, with the house party protocol, as I said, I could see you probably should have activated at least 1 or 2, but it doesn't really bother me. Now, a thing connected with it, this thing doesn't bother me either, but I don't really hear a lot of people complain about this one, but maybe it's just me looking at it. The fact that the house party protocol suits were defeated super easily. Now, this is the reason I bring this up. The first film, the suits, it destroys somewhat, but doesn't destroy super easily, and especially since he's fighting another suit. Same thing with the second film. Third film, he gets semi-destroyed, but it's not like super heavily. If anything, he gets destroyed more when he gets smacked with Thor's hammer than anything else. Now, in this film, you could probably chalk it up to the fact that he built the suits when he couldn't sleep and all that, so maybe they're not built as well. And also, since he sped them out quickly, he didn't put as much quality into them. Then, of course, there's the other fact that they're fighting people who are extremists, which is basically them using the atomic energy within their atoms. So you could chalk it up to them being superheated to the point where it could cut through the suits easily. Which that's the way I viewed it, which is why I didn't really have a big problem with it. But it's something like, it's one of those things I have to say, Did he have the suits made in China? That's what it seems like with how easily they're getting destroyed. But it doesn't really bother me. Number 5, another suit one. Why the heck does the War Machine / Iron Patriot suit not work when the president's in it? Now this is one that I didn't really notice until it was pointed out, but it is one that's like, okay, it works when Rhodes in it, it works when that one guy's in it. Why doesn't it work when the president's in it? Now, this is one that I can't really ignore, but I actually think of an interesting in-world scenario for why he didn't use it. One could be that, well, there's two ones. One, the president could have been drugged, and you know what they say about drinking and driving. So maybe that. But he doesn't really seem drunk when Rhodey got to him, but then again, he only has a couple lines of dialogue. Another thing is, maybe this president is the W of the cinematic universe. You know, the George W. Which, if you think about it, might make sense, considering that the deal that his vice president makes. Granted, his vice president is not as evil as Dick Cheney is, you know. Halliburton is the precious, it's the precious, haha. Because he actually did just make a deal for a good reason, or what he might consider a good reason. It just would make sense if he's the W of this universe. Now, how am I supposed to get this Iron Man suit to work? I'm the president of the United States, should be able to work this thing easily. Hey, Colonel Rhodes, can you work this thing? Yeah, just fly us out of here, fly us out of here. Yeah. God bless you and God bless America. Next one, how Extremis is portrayed. I never read the comics that much, I just read up a little bit about it, so nothing really much to complain about here. If anything, it's about probably why they cured Pepper at the end, which I can understand why they do it, because even if you can control the power, you're still a little unstable, which is something Tony even mentions in passing when he's talking to, sorry about that microphone, when he's talking to Guy Pearce's character, Killian. Which I might want to bring up him as another thing I don't mind. I don't mind how Killian is portrayed in this movie. Some people have drawn parallels between him and Edward Nygma in Batman Forever, which I could see that a little bit, but I will say, between the two, I would say Killian's a little bit more justified in doing this than Nygma is. Because, think of it, Nygma does it because he thinks that Bruce Wayne's going to side with him with his idea, and then Bruce says no because he thinks the item might be too dangerous, because, as he puts it, just leaves too many questions. And then he's basically fanboy, heartbroken. You were supposed to understand. All that. In this film, Killian was basically just left on the roof while Tony Stark went to go. So with that, you might be a little bit more pissed off. Granted, how Killian explains it might be a little bit just like, okay, weird, but maybe he just wanted to give the abridged version. You never know. Now, of course, there's another thing with Killian that's going to be coming up in a little bit, but now, before I get to that, I want to think offhand if there's any problems people have said about the movie. Oh yeah, I remembered one. This is one that I only noticed when How It Should Have Ended made fun of it. That you could draw parallels between it and The Incredibles. But I guess you could say it's probably just them using a similar archetype rather than it ripping it off fully. But it's an interesting parallel to draw. Oh my God, this is The Incredibles. Yeah, the only difference is your superhero actually has money. Now, of course, this is one of the biggest complaints people have had about the movie, and that is the character of the Mandarin, as played by Ben Kingsley. We all know that the plot twist... But, by the way, if you guys didn't know, if you guys already hadn't guessed, there are spoilers in this movie, in this video. Anyway, the Mandarin, of course, being an actor in the movie, and the real Mandarin, of course, obviously being Killian. Now, a lot of people have been pissed about this. I mean, I found out about the twist because a fanboy was pissed about it and basically spoiled it for me, which is why I wasn't pissed about it, because I knew it was coming and I just watched to see how it was shown and how it was led up to in the movie. Now, I can understand if it's not your cup of tea how they did it, but I don't have a problem with it. A couple of reasons. One, I thought the twist was handled very well. Oh, crap. I wonder what fell was this. My mouse. Now, as I said, I thought the twist was handled very well within the movie. And two, it technically is faithful to something in the ultimate versions of the comics. Now, the reason I say technically is because it's not 100% the same. I only found this out more recently, which is just adds to me not hating the Mandarin. Because, here's the thing, I'll get it. In the normal version of the comics, the Mandarin is descended from a warlord, or a very rich guy, he's half Chinese and half English. Which, by the way, that's part of the reason why when I heard Ben Kingsley was cast as Mandarin, I didn't go through a hissy fit like, he's not the right ethnicity. You could have cast a Chinese guy or an English guy or a white guy in general, and it wouldn't have mattered. He's the Mandarin, so you cast an English guy, it works. I mean, the guy had played Gandhi already, so he's a good actor. He won an Oscar for that performance, if I remember correctly. And also, I like Kingsley as an actor anyway. And of course, all the trailers and stuff, I thought he looked good in it. Now, back to the comics. And in it, he's basically like a trained warrior who basically spent all his money on, I forget what it was off the top of my head, but he spent all of his money, and then because he had no money, he couldn't pay his taxes, so his home was revoked. And I remember the character very like only a little bit from the Iron Man cartoon from the 90s, which I did watch, but it was years ago, so I don't remember everything on it. But if I remember correctly, in the comics and in that show, he had the 10 magical rings. And in the comics, I think he finds them in an alien ship. Which, with how they've portrayed the Marvel Universe so far in the live-action movies, especially the cinematic universe, you could do that, especially with how they're bringing in Thanos, but you'd have to work it right. Or you could, like, put it there that they were brought there similarly to how the Tesseract was, or do something like that. Or make them connected to the Infinity Gauntlet. Or you could have had the Mandarin be connected with Thanos somehow, and then build him up more for Guardians of the Galaxy. But that's if they had gone with that one. Now, the way they went with it, first of all, I want to know if Shane Black did this intentionally or not. If it's just me seeing it, then good for him. Now, what I mean is that in the Ultimate Universe, there are two versions of the Mandarin. The second one is basically like a group that's somehow connected to Tony Stark's origins in that universe. Kind of, I guess, similar yet different to how he kind of is connected to the origin in the cartoon, where it's him that involved with the 10 rings and all that. Now the other one, now this is the part of it that is semi-faithful to, is that Tony Stark, because of his ego, he makes an Iron Man TV show, and he creates a major villain for him. Guess who the villain is? The Mandarin. So it's a TV show, so what does that mean the Mandarin is? An actor. So it's semi-faithful to that part of it. But it is different because with today's climate, it takes that and makes the Mandarin more of a real-life terrorist, and then does a parody of the whole conspiracy theory about Osama bin Laden being dead or just being an actor and all that. Which, of course, the first hint that that's the direction they're going in is how the Mandarin's little scenes are filmed, which is one of the first hints. I'm like, okay, this looks weird, because if you've seen just like even little clips of the Osama bin Laden clips, you notice how they're filmed. They kind of film, if anything, kind of like just like a bigger budget version of these videos I do here on YouTube. Whereas in the Mandarin's ones are filmed like a movie, which of course that's our first hint. And also this is another one. This is one that I have to bring up, is that the Mandarin's voice does sound like Walter Cronkite. But that could be just another hint. That could be just a acting decision that Kingsley made to give the audience a hint that there's something weird about this version of the Mandarin. And another reason, that's the reason story-wise why I don't hate the Mandarin. And I'll say another thing is that Kingsley's performance in this film is a credit to how good of an actor he is. Just think of this. The whole movie, well, the first part of half of the movie, he's an actor. He's basically playing a character, playing a character. Think about it. It's hard enough for an actor to play one character. Now imagine if you have to play a character who's playing a character. A little bit harder, because not only do you have to do the motivation for the character you're playing, but you have to also do the motivation for the character he's playing. So a little bit harder. And it also shows off two parts of his acting. His serious acting is when he's the "you'll never see me coming," and then his comedic timing acting when he's doing the actual character. One, did you get off the drugs? No, they said give me more drugs. And of course, it kind of hints that whole conversation right there might have actually been just a facade for him to buy time, but it's very subtly hinted. I panicked, but then I handled it. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is Tony going through the anxiety attacks. As I mentioned in my earlier review, I actually identified with Tony because of the whole accident thing I was in, so I can understand the anxiety attacks. And if it bothers you that they had to do that, that's cool, but I think it makes sense. Not only just because of what happened at the end of the Avengers, but it could have been that, because that's, I think, the closest he came to actually dying, because he could have stopped breathing, his heart could have stopped there. He almost dies in the first movie twice, first the arc reactor at the end, plus, of course, the whole shrapnel thing. Second movie, he doesn't really come close to dying that much. I mean, he has some close calls, but he doesn't really have a thing where he almost dies. Avengers, he almost dies because of going into space and all that. Now, it could be that alone, or it could be, another thing, could be all the stuff just building up and then You know, some people, as they as it was worded in an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond about anxiety attacks, your mind is, for lack of a better word, a donkey. You can only take so many bags before it lies down and won't get up. Could be that. Now I will give some of the people that complain about another thing this, and that is that Tony, they didn't make him an alcoholic for this. That would have been interesting if he had drowned himself in more alcohol to compensate for it, and that combined with the attacks is why he couldn't sleep. Now, I can also tell you, as someone who's actually dealt with insomnia, it sucks. You do anything to try to kill the boredom, which is why I could see him building all those suits, and because of his tiredness, probably not doing the best job on some of them. Anyway, back to this. It would have been interesting to see him actually drink more, because in the first two movies he does drink, more so in the second one, because we actually do see him get rolling drunk when he thinks he's gonna die, which I'm like, you guys always think he's gonna die. Yeah, I think we got it. And of course, the Avengers, he has that one drink when he's talking with Loki. But for some reason in this film, he doesn't drink, at least that we see. I mean, the closest he gets to drinking is when he's talking with the actor who played the Mandarin. And of course, he says no to the beer, but I think it's in a serious moment. He's like, kind of speaking for some members of the audience at that point. He's like, kind of like, what the fuck? And so it makes sense he wouldn't drink. But like I said, I give some of the people points that he should have probably drank. It probably would have made that a little bit more stronger. Now, of course, I forgot to mention this. Killian being the Mandarin, I don't mind. It kind of throws kind of a curveball, but I think it worked. Especially with how pissed he is at Tony. The reveal and all that. I thought he did a good job in how they edited the scene. And of course, there's another I think about the Mandarin some people complain about, which I don't see this complaint, and that is the Mandarin is supposed to be Tony's greatest adversary, and they effed it up. Technically speaking, if you look at it, he technically so far is Tony's greatest solo adversary. The reason I say solo is because I'm not going to count his fights in the Avengers, because basically those aren't solo enemies, it's collaborative enemies. First movie, he fought Obadiah. Obadiah had a suit, which is basically based on his original Iron Man suit. Now, that was a tough fight, but that was mostly because the arc reactor he had was not built for that type of suit, so it was draining faster. So he had a tough fight because Obadiah had a big suit and he had his normal arc reactor, and he basically had to fight with his wits. Second movie, he had sort of a tough fight. His first fight against Whiplash was tough mostly because he wasn't expecting a guy with another arc reactor kind of cut off balance, but then eventually he defeated him. The end fight is mostly because of the numbers, but him and Rhodes do eventually win. In this one, a lot of the suits are destroyed by Killian and his henchmen, and then of course Tony basically has to keep switching and fighting an enemy that could destroy his suits. Like I said before, it could be because he did just make them as well. If that's the case, why didn't he just get the other Iron Man suits to come out? Which this will be connected with another thing soon, is because, as far as we know, those original suits he made were only knocked down during the explosions. They weren't destroyed, as far as we know. Because I didn't see any evidence that showed the suits fully destroyed as beyond functioning. Maybe right away, but they probably could be fixed eventually. But that's another point that we connect to. In a weird way, he technically is Tony's greatest solo adversary so far, unless of course you count himself. But he hasn't had to fight a shadow version of himself yet, so. Let's count the bottle in the second movie. Now, the last one I have to say is probably the fact that he destroys the suits at the end, which people are like, why is he destroying the suits? He's going to have to start all over. Iron Man, he's going to start all over. Technically not, because like I just said, we technically don't see this original, the Mark 1 through 5 suits destroyed. We just see them knocked down in the explosion. They could still be functioning. If that's the case, we'll probably see them be used in another Iron Man movie or the Avengers sequel, or we'll see a new suit. Remember, it's called the Clean Slate Protocol. It just means he's destroying the ones there. He doesn't mean he's not going to build any more. And also the fact he throws that one element into the water doesn't mean he's not going to be Iron Man anymore. Because as we see in the second film, he installed individual arc reactors into each suit. Why else would Rhodes be able to drive the Mark II? Which, by the way, another thing I gotta mention is that Rhodes stole the Mark II in the second movie, yet it's back in this one. Now I don't know if this two-part comic series is considered canon, but it was distributed at Regal Cinemas movie theaters, and I got one of them. It's supposed to bridge the gap between the Avengers and Iron Man 3 a little bit, show what Rhodes was doing, because he's not there during the Avengers, obviously. Now, apparently during it, he's off fighting terrorists, as I thought he probably was. More specifically, the Ten Rings. Now, what it shows in the beginning is that after the events of Iron Man 2, but before the Avengers, Tony took the War Machine suit, took out all the hammer tech, and basically get into a little discussion about Rhodes. Technically you did that thing, what's the word, you stole it. And of course he shows Rhodes that he actually built him a suit already for him. Little thing about it, the suit could have given him a heart attack, which I don't give that, but it shows that could be why the Mark II is back there. At least that's the way I'm going with it. It also explains why Rhodes wasn't there. Now back to the whole thing. The suits are still there, could be functioning. We can make new suits, so I don't have a problem with him destroying the suits. And possibly he could, if you go with my thought that maybe they're not built as well as they could be, maybe he'll destroy them that way too, just so if he has to get into a future fight, he's not using subpar technology or suits not built as well as they could be. And also it's a good moment, epically, at least for me. That's about it I could think of. I had one more thought, but it just went... Now, oh yeah, now I remember the other one. Another complaint, I think this for me, this comes off kind of as a nitpick, but that's just me. Why didn't he call for help from the other Avengers? I think I already got a common sense explanation for that. Iron Man 3 takes place at the same time as Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Thor Enter the Dark World. It makes sense. Thor and Captain America, Hawkeye, and Black Widow are off doing their own thing. Now, why didn't he call Bruce Banner? That one I can agree with, but I think Bruce... I don't know, Bruce is off doing his own thing, but some people say, well, he had enough time to talk with him, but of course he's going to talk with a friend, because even though he can control his anger, I don't think Bruce likes to turn into the Hulk unless he can help it. Like during Avengers, both times he can't help it. First time he's tricked into it, second time has to help save the world, so he'll do it. Just like the ending of the '08 movie, he'll do it because he has to save a big threat. Now during this movie, it could be a big threat, but he probably thinks, Tony, you and Rhodes got this. But that's what I think. They were off doing their own thing. That's why it doesn't really bug me that Tony doesn't call for help. Now a lot of the other stuff, like the little kid and all that I don't complain about. That I don't have a problem with. Tony spending a lot of time out of the suit, like I mentioned before, doesn't bother me because he's still technically Iron Man. Now, as for the remote-controlled suit that we see in this film, that I thought was an interesting idea. It actually led to a couple of good comedic moments that I actually did see coming the first time, but it doesn't bother me if I think it's taken from the comics. I could be wrong. Now, as I said before, if you don't like the film, that's cool, but as I said at the beginning of this video, this is the reasons why I don't hate Iron Man 3.